So, as we can see, I'm not in my usual garden today. In fact, one of the first ever vlogs I shot for this channel was filmed in this area. I also shot a review here about last year, but today we're back because I found something interesting on the App Store last night. So last night I had to go take a thumbnail, but because it was of this camera, I had to use my phone. Now, also because the background was a chalkboard, the white balance was very much thrown in the default camera app. So I quickly went to the App Store, tried to find an app where I could do some manual white balancing, and this is where I came across Yamera. It helped me easily get the shot because there was a nice grey card option, but then I noticed something. There was a section for raw photos, and raw photos are nothing new to me. I pretty much exclusively shoot raw photos on this camera. In fact, I've shot raw photos on smartphones before. I think it was the Nokia 9, but this is the first time I'd ever tried it with an iPhone. In fact, I shot that thumbnail in RAW. This meant I could bring it into Lightroom, I could actually brighten the camera, and it gave me a really good editing experience. So, as the app actually only costs £2, and also, it's a lovely overcast day, I thought we'd give raw photography on the iPhone a go, and then see if it's an app you should consider to take your photos to the next level. So the first test I really want to go over is a landscape test. Now, raw photos are usually really good for landscapes because you get that extra bit of dynamic range when you go in to adjust like your highlights and your shadows. And this seems to be probably the perfect place. Look at that. See if we can get a nice looking raw photo. Hopefully. Yeah, that looks good. All right, on to the next one. So the next advantage of raw photos is you can adjust the clarity. Well, you can now more or less do this pretty well on JPEG photos. You just have that extra level of control when you go to shoot raw. So behind me, we have a pretty misty situation. And what I'm hoping we can do is we can take a photo, then we can adjust the clarity and dehaze in Lightroom and pull out a really cool image. Okay, so got the photo. Now we're gonna head on to the next spot. Just realized my phone battery is very low and it's only like 3 o'clock. This is very new. Up until this point, my phone battery has been solid. So it's strange that now it's suddenly like stopped being very good. Might finally be time for me to retire the iPhone 10. Damn. Something initially I found that I don't particularly like about the app is because, from what I can see at least, there's no option in the interface to immediately switch between the telephoto and the standard lens. And when I'm taking my photos, I often do like to switch between the two focal points. I find they provide different perspectives and can give your photo a unique look. So honestly, the fact that it doesn't have this isn't great, and I would like to see that in a future update. Next up, we're talking colors. Now, one huge advantage of RAW over a compressed file format like JPEG is that you get more detail to work with. So if you want to change colors in post, you have more option to do that if you shoot in RAW. Here, I've found some foxgloves. So let's take a picture and see what we can do in post. All right, so I'm back. So I did have to stop filming because it started raining very hard. Nevertheless, I did get some photos. I also did go take a few more, but now we're gonna dig into Lightroom and see what we can do with these photos. Got the laptop out. We're gonna do some serious editing today. So let's go ahead and send these over. And let's get some editing done. Okay, so I've finished editing these photos. First of all, we're going to talk about how the raw photos performed on the iPhone. Things like how I edited them, what they were like at a camera. Then we're going to be talking about the app. So the first photo we have here is this landscape shot that I took. Technically, it was in portrait mode, but oh well. Now, out of camera, this was a very dark photo, and that's something I noticed with most of these. I'm not quite sure why this is. In fact, sometimes in the camera roll, they'd show up as overexposed, but when you clicked on them, they would just go dark. Luckily though, because it's a raw photo, I did manage to bring all that detail back, and we got a really impressive amount of dynamic range out of this thing. It also does seem to look a little bit sharper. Don't get me wrong, iPhone photos are usually pretty sharp as it is, but looking at the close-up leaves on the trees and like the horizon, it's quite clear that there is a good amount of sharpening here. Also, because it's a raw photo, you have the option to go in and just add a little bit more sharpening. All in all, I went for a high dynamic range but natural look with this one, and shooting raw on the iPhone allowed this to happen. So yeah, for landscape photos where you want a bit more dynamic range, shooting raw could be worth it on iPhone. Next up, we have the hazy shot. Now again, this was pretty underexposed at a camera, so to compensate this for all of them, I just actually hit the auto button next to the tone in Lightroom, and it put them at a pretty good exposure. So as I said with this one, it was kind of hazy on the day, and two great tools in Lightroom are clarity and dehaze. I used a combination of those. I used 8 points of clarity and 16 points of dehaze, and I managed to clear the landscape so you can see into the distance. Once again, sharpness and dynamic range are solid with this image, and yeah, all in all, for essentially removing a little bit of that fog in post, shooting RAW is definitely worth it. Next up, we have another landscape photo, but this time I went with a bit more of a stylistic grade. So with this one, I brought the exposure back, adjusted for the shadows and the highlights, then I added 2 graduated filters, brought the path up, darkened the sky, added a green tint to the clouds, and sort of an orangey, brownish, reddish film look to the ground. But I think this would look really good with a little bit of film grain. Let's add some film grain. Yeah, honestly, I think that makes it look better. For this photo, again, we had really good dynamic range, but we also had some room to mess with the colors to give it a more creative look. And that's always something I enjoy doing with photos. It's the main reason I shoot RAW on this camera. And yeah, if you want to take your edits to that next level, I always recommend shooting in RAW. Oh yeah, I did add a preset, but then I pretty much changed every element about it. But yeah, I often find these film emulation looks to be very destructive if there isn't enough detail in the image. And as I said earlier, with RAW photos, you just get that little bit of extra detail that helps you move those colors around so you can get the look that you want. Yeah, overall, for stylistic grading, I think this works great. Moving on, we have HSL and color tools. Now for this one, we had the pink foxgloves, and with this photo, I had 2 goals. Make the foxgloves purple, and sort of tint the grass a little bit blue and then desaturate it. Of course, I had to do all this without the image falling apart, and I've always found this to be a very trying test on cameras. To get this look, I dug into the HSL settings, shifted both the magenta and the purple towards that dark purple look, because I wanted to change the colors, but I didn't want to go crazy. So I thought changing the pink foxgloves to purple would be a good test. And as we can see, it worked. But perhaps a little bit more intensive, we then went into the greens. I gave it plus 41 on the hue to give it that more dark green look, and then I dragged the saturation down by 40 points. You can also mess with the luminance. I would personally recommend going up if you're going for this grade. Going down, it just looks kind of weird and blotchy. It doesn't look good. And yeah, overall, it handled the image pretty well. Although we can see I did accidentally misfocus. Damn. This image was also slightly incorrect on the white balance at a camera, and again, that's a massive advantage of RAW. You have the power to go back and adjust that in post. So yeah, it passed this test as well. Next up, I wanted to test cropping ability, so I took this photo of a wall, and then I cropped in Lightroom. The other thing I wanted to test with this photo was extreme sharpness, so as well as cropping in, I added 80 points of sharpness to really make that detail stand out. And if we go ahead and zoom in, despite this only being a 12 megapixel sensor, shooting RAW can really give you that little bit of extra detail, so things like cropping in post are more doable. And the final photo of the day was a preset test, so I wanted to throw on a really intensive preset and just simply see if the image falls apart. So for this photo, I used the Red Crush preset by Peter McKinnon, and this is a seriously intensive preset. Not only does this preset completely crush the highlights, but it also pretty much brings the shadows up as high as they can go. So yeah, this is about as intense as it gets. It's also got a super weird looking curve. Saturation has been dragged down and the vibrance has been brought up. The clarity is at like 53. Yeah, this is about the most intensive preset I have in my library. Things I'm looking for are, of course, digital noise, which I can see a little bit of in those darker areas, as well as blotchier spots. Now, again, I can see a little bit of that in the whites, but it's nothing that would ruin the photo. And yeah, overall, while I will have to do a little bit more testing, I'm actually quite impressed with this. Okay, so now we've talked about the photos, we're gonna be talking about the app. Was it good? Was it bad? Okay, so once again, the name of the app I used was Yamera. Now, there was a free version, but that won't give you RAW functionality. It does give you access to things like manual control and white balance and things like that, but to get RAW images, you do need to pay for it. Now, initially, I did have trouble switching between the main and the telephoto camera, but eventually I realized they bundled an interface element. So instead of the camera icon with the rotating arrows being strictly from switching from the front to the back camera, it also lets you switch from the main camera to the telephoto camera. And while this was a little weird at first, I did eventually get used to it, and I don't really have a problem with this. Other than that though, the interface was pretty easy to use. Easy to navigate, the elements were easy to understand. As I previously said, I love the fact that it has a gray card feature in the white balance section. This, no joke, makes white balancing so easy. There's also some pretty cool video options, by far my favorite feature of which has got to be the codec selection. Something I've recently been having a lot of trouble with is using the native iPhone codecs in Final Cut, which is a little weird, but the fact that you can select between H.264 or HEVC is a really good feature. And while I would like to see elements like focus peaking or log, I think sometimes I need to remember that, again, this app was only like £2. So yeah, at the start of the usage, while I did have a couple of complaints, as I've used this app, they've mostly gone. So to close the video, should you shoot raw photos on your phone? And is this app worth it? For things like casual photos of like your morning coffee, I don't know. No, you probably shouldn't. As I said, it does come out of the camera pretty dark, and so you wouldn't really get any benefits, but you would have to dig into Lightroom and like adjust your exposure. However, if you want to take some higher end photos on your phone, then I definitely think it's worth it. As I said, you can get a lot more dynamic range, you have a lot of extra freedom in post, and you can get really creative with your stylistic looks. As for the app, it's easy to use, it works well, it has some nice video features, and it is very cheap. So yeah, I probably would recommend this app. I know for a fact that I'll certainly be using this app more often now, and if you want to take some nice raw photos on your phone, or hey, just have access to manual camera features, then I'd say this app is definitely worth taking a look at. Alright guys, so that's it for today. As always, thank you for watching. Remember to like the video if you want to see more content like this, and smash that subscribe button. I'm done for now, and I'll see you guys in the next one.